Randy, thank you for being here today. I'm looking forward to this. This is a third in a series on leadership, and I'm really putting on the hat more of I used to be a scholar in leadership, so I'm still trying to learn. So I'm learning from the best. That was said because you're my boss, but here we go. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to know is, this is a softball question. Who in your life do you think has most shaped you in terms of the kind of leader you are?
You know, I thought about that question, and it's actually hard to answer one person.
Okay,
So I'll have to share a few.
Okay.
I'll start with one of the first people to help me learn about leadership, and that was my Scoutmaster in Boy Scouts.
Okay.
I'm a big advocate of Boy Scouts. I grew up in Scouts. I was a Scoutmaster for 17 years. And
Were you an Eagle Scout?
thank you for pointing out my failure.
Oh, sorry.
Of all the questions, I am proud to say that I did help 14 boys become Eagle Scouts.
Oh,
But
even better.
I've got all kinds of excuses. We'll save that for
Okay.
a therapy session another day.
Okay.
But I did not become an Eagle Scout. However, I was the senior patrol leader, led the troop. And the thing my Scoutmaster, Mr. Gillenwater, did was he empowered me to make decisions. He allowed me to fail, take chances. He would sit in the back room where he could hear me lead the troop. We would gather and plan trips, and sometimes they were successful, sometimes they weren't, sometimes things went a little wrong. So we always like to say scouting is a safe place to fail. But what he taught me was that you had to try. People aren't born leaders. I might believe you're not a born leader, and it's not something that you can read. You might learn a lot in a podcast, but I always like to think leadership is like free throws. You've got to toe the line and just take some shots. You could watch podcasts, you could read books, you could get degrees and certificates in leadership, but you just got to practice.
Right.
So giving people opportunity to practice is an important thing. Mr. Gillenwater did that. And then another leader that I look to is my father.
Yeah.
My father is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. My friends say if you look in the dictionary, there's a picture of my dad under entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But my dad taught me determination, optimism, resilience. My dad never would give up, and I've got long stories that may be too long for this answer, but he taught me those things. And then finally, I look to your friend and mine, Bill Haslam, as a leader for the state, being able to cast a vision and giving of yourself to make a difference for others. He's been my role model for that.
Well, that's a great answer. I every person I've talked to has included their dad. Isn't that? I think that's kind of interesting. Let's just go one step further. Like, to be an entrepreneur and be successful at it means you had to fail at some things. So, as a child growing up, did you have any idea that your dad was trying, failing, trying, winning, trying, failing? You know what I mean? Like, did you understand that?
No. When I was young, Dad was always successful.
Yeah.
At least that's what he told me.
Okay.
So it was
Okay.
when I came to work for him that I learned some of the challenges that he
Okay.
had. And but I started working for him at age 8. But at age 8, working on the assembly line, getting $1 an hour, moving up to minimum wage at age 14, which was $4.34 an hour. I was kind of guarded from the ups and downs of the business.
Right.
By age 19, when I went to work for him full time, then I got to see firsthand some of the challenges that he had.
Yeah.
But through it all, he would always come up with a new solution. No matter what bad happened, he would say, "Well, I didn't really want to do that anyway. I actually have a better plan." And so he was always been an inspiration in that respect.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so your path to becoming the president of the UT system. Sometimes I've said to you, that's an interesting path, and I don't think you like that term. It's an unusual path.
Yeah.
So you've been an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a public servant. How do you see that path influencing how you lead today?
Yeah, to that point, I tell people all the time that it's a story you've heard a million times. Dog fixed salesman becomes public servant, becomes university president. If you've heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times.
Right.
But no, it is very, very different. I think in every situation I learned something different. As an entrepreneur, I learned what it meant to create a culture in an organization, to be innovative, to be determined, to be willing to accept change. If you're leading a business, even more so than a higher education and more so than a state, you had to be very, very nimble, and you had to learn to adapt quickly because the market's changing rapidly, sometimes within hours, and so you've got to constantly adapt. In public service, my time working in the state government, I learned that It's more challenging with a larger organization because there's more stakeholders to bring along. And then finally, in higher education, there's even more stakeholders still. But I think in every place I learned new skills along the way. And I'll share maybe, sorry, but to go to a little bit further, the thing that's different is the levels of persuasion. If it was a scale of 1 to 10, in a business, level of persuasion is like a 3. You still have to get everybody to get together and believe in your mission. But at the end of the day, if they don't buy into the mission, you can ask them to leave. Yeah. At the state, as long as you can get, it's a 5.1. As long as you can get 51% of the people to go along, you can get things done. But I think in higher education, it's like a 8 or 9, because we have, as you know, alumni, legislators, students, faculty, all are stakeholders. And if one group is overlooked, you're not going to be successful. Right. So it just takes longer. Yeah. So that's the thing that's different. The thing that's the same. This was something I always tried to make sure I wasn't one of those guys that was successful in one thing and then thought they knew everything. Yeah. And you see that over and over. They think if I'm good at one thing, then I can expound on all these things that I don't have any knowledge of. But I did find, just because I was a successful entrepreneur in the pet products business, did that mean I'd be good at anything else? I did find that there were things that worked in that worked in other things. 4 things, and we could talk about them in more detail. But 1, create a mission that gets people excited, that creates a vision that even if you don't give a lot of direction, everybody just really wants to go there. It's something that's impactful and motivating. The second thing is have a strategy to get there. The simpler, the better. The third is making sure that you surround yourself with great people. We could talk about that at a different time, but that's not easy to do. And finally, maybe the most importantly, create a culture that creates an environment that allows you to be successful and be a part of something bigger and better than yourself. Yeah. So I found those 4 things, whether I'm in a public agency within the state government, in higher education, in a nonprofit, in a baseball team, or in a business, those seem to be universal, at least for me.
So let's go back to the university business, since I'm in that with you. All those stakeholders, one thing you didn't mention was they often don't have the same goals. They don't want the same thing. You've been very successful, in my view, in managing your way through that. How does that work for you? Like, particularly when they're in direct conflict. You mentioned get them engaged and involved, but you can get them involved and they still don't necessarily get what they want. So,
well, I think it starts with, and you do the same thing, but it starts with listening and making sure that you take time to understand everyone's points of view, and then take time to share the other points of view that they think they may disagree with, and then finding the common ground. Yeah. So often we think we disagree when in fact we actually agree. Freedom of speech is always one that comes to mind, but whether you're on the right or the left, each one has somewhat seems like a hostile view, but they actually agree on the same thing, and just helping us understand the common ground. And I find that I'm making up a stat, somebody can prove me wrong, but 90%, 95% of the really important things people agree on, but we get so hung up on the things we disagree on. So I think listening, understanding, and finding the common ground and build on that.
Well, I see you do that every day. Like you're persistent, like to get to the common ground, and that helps all of us. So
I pass this on to your listeners. Yeah. But it's easy to say, it's hard to do, because it really takes a lot of time. Yeah. It's so easy to know that you're right and just say, this is the way we need to go, let's just go. Right. But if people aren't going with you, then you're not going to get there. Yeah. So you have to take the time to share, to get buy-in, and get people to go with you.
Yeah. I'm switching gears here a little bit, but you're very proud of the fact you're a first-generation college student. And you just said a minute ago, when I was 19, working for my dad. So, like 19, you're normally in college. Not everybody's working for their dad. How do you think being a first-generation student shaped you as president of this system? Not as a person, but as the president.
I think there's probably a lot of things, but I'll say one, it just makes me appreciate the value of an education. I mean, maybe, I don't know this for sure, but maybe if everybody in your family's gone to college, your brothers and sisters, everybody around you has gone to college, you may take it for granted that this is just a birthright, this is what we do, and everybody gets to go to college. But nobody in my family's history had ever gone to college. And my father even said when I was thinking about going to college that, son, this is a waste of time. There's really no need to go to college. The only reason why you go to college is to get a job and I can give you a job now. So why waste your time going to college?
Yeah.
But for me, it was an accomplishment. I loved it. I loved learning. So there was that. My friends were going, which was a motivator. But it was just also a sense of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Being in Boy Scouts, you get badges. You know, this was a big badge.
Yeah.
But I think it opened doors for me. It provided knowledge that I wouldn't have otherwise had, gave me a sense of confidence that you could do a big project. I think one of the most important things about anyone that has earned a degree, this is a very complicated, long project, something that's hard to accomplish. And if you have the discipline, the persistence to stick with it, whether it's in my case, it was 3 years,
Yeah.
so I was in a hurry, but 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, you've proven to the world that you have the persistence to be able to accomplish big things. And so for me, I want to make sure other people have the opportunity to do so. And as you know, I got started in the higher education path by creating something called Tennessee Achieves to send young people across the state of Tennessee to community and technical college free of charge.
Yeah.
Then we created the Tennessee Promise that created an endowment that made it possible for that to happen forever. So it's always been about access. And
Yeah.
when I take this job, as you
Right.
and you work with this with me, and so do all the other
Yep.
chancellors, but it's about providing more opportunity for more students and making it more affordable for more students, and making sure more students actually, or more young people in the state and adults know the value of a college degree.
I think that's great. And I think we work at that every day. I see it, and I see it in what your priorities are. So it's good to know. Here, related to that, like in your background, sales was your first job, basically. And I know you think sales is important for leaders. You're always talking about always be closing.
Right.
So say a little more about that, because I don't think leaders often realize that a big part of what you're doing is sales.
Yeah, I think as you and I both know, I mean, the primary part of our job is sales, and I think that's almost, or it's true for not just leaders, but people in almost every role. You're selling your boss, you're selling your colleagues, you're selling customers, you're selling other stakeholders,
Yeah.
you're selling an idea, you're selling a product, you're selling a service, you're selling yourself.
Yep.
You're constantly, whether you know it or not, you're constantly selling. And so having that basic skill set is critically important. And as you mentioned,
Yeah.
we talk about at UT all the time.
Yeah.
Remember, the most important thing we want to teach at UT is your ABCs. Always be closing.
Yeah.
And I was proud at an event yesterday where one of our Ag Research Center guys on the podium, he's talking to a bunch of ag secretaries across the South, and he managed to work in the need for a meeting space at his Ag Research Center, looking at Keith and I. And I said, always be closing.
There you go.
But never miss an opportunity.
You
But-
reap what you sow, Randy.
But but I'm proud of that, and I like seeing that culture.
Yeah.
But so I'd say sales is really fundamental. And if I can give a sales tip,
Yeah.
I learned this from my dad.
Okay.
So my first sales job was for him, selling electric fencing to farm stores.
Okay.
And so I'm 19 years old. Actually, I was younger. He put me on the road at age 16, so I was paying my way through school during breaks selling. And I learned the products down pat. I mean, I knew every jewel, every technical feature of the product inside and out. And I made sure that my customers knew it.
Yeah.
I would walk into the store, the 16, of course, being 16-year-olds, looking back, it put me at a disadvantage. They're like, who's this kid?
Yeah.
They don't know me, they don't know the company, and some
Yeah.
16-year-old kids trying to make a cold call, selling us electric fencing
Yeah.
from a company we don't know. But I would go in
Yeah.
and just start talking about all the great features, and they would glass over that. You could tell within the first 30 seconds they'd made their mind up. They're not buying from me, and they're just wondering how long this is going to take. Just before we can say no, before I could have a break for me to shut up. But
Yeah.
I went out for a week and didn't sell a single thing. So the next week, my dad goes out with me, and he goes in watches me for a couple calls. The next call, he goes in, doesn't say a thing about the product. Just walks in and starts talking to the guy about, hey, do you know Frank 30 miles down the road? And then they start talking about Frank. Next thing you know, they must have wasted like 30 minutes just
Wow.
BSing.
Yeah.
And then finally the guy said, hey, what are you selling? And he bought everything we had on the truck. So Dad taught me that before you can sell, they've got to like you. You've got to
Yeah.
build a relationship.
Yeah.
You've got to build trust.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think too many times we also cut corners on. You try to just go for sell the idea, sell whatever it is you're trying to sell. If you don't have a relationship,
Yeah.
then it's not going to work.
That's right. Okay, so here's a question for you. So what's the difference between running an organization you own and running an organization the state owns? Like,
Well,
what's the biggest difference for you?
it's back to that level of persuasion. I think the biggest thing is just the time and effort you have to take to get buy-in.
Yeah.
In your company, again, you have to make sure you're, even at, at times I would own as much as 100% down to as little as 70%, but I could always make the call. But if I didn't take the time to get the team on board, and that could be true for you and I with our cabinet,
Yeah.
or the people that work with us, we may not own the company or own the university, but they need to do what we say.
Right.
But if they don't really believe in it, they might be just passive aggressive.
Right.
They may say they're going to support it, but they
Yeah.
really don't. So you still had to take a certain amount of time. But at the university level, because we have so many stakeholders, the biggest thing is just you had to make sure everybody's bought in.
Yeah.
When we have a new idea, we got to make sure the board of directors is supported.
That's right.
And every time you rush through and forget one of them, they'll let you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so many times, we won't talk about that here
Right.
live on TV or
Right.
even recorded.
That's right.
But there's been most of my mistakes in this job has been where I overlooked a constituency and decided to do something before I talked to a particular group.
Yeah. Well, people have to own it. I love what you're saying about that, and that's the sales job.
No.
I don't like it when people say, "Well, isn't this what you wanted?" Like, I want to do what you want. That's not. I want them to be pitching what they want to me, and then let's figure out how to do it together.
A technique, passing on to
Okay.
leaders out there,
Yeah.
something that I always say, anytime I've got a new group, and sometimes I remind my existing group, whether it's in my cabinet now or my executive leadership team at the state or my company, but my goal as the president of whatever is to bat above the Mendoza line.
Okay.
What that means for the non-baseball fans is
Yeah.
there was a guy named Mendoza that was famous for saying, if he could just bat over 200, he could stay on the team. So that means you get a hit 1 out of every 5 times.
Ooh.
So I tell my team that, I'm an idea guy. I'll come in with a lot of ideas, but I just want to bat above the Mendoza
Right.
line. 1 out of the 5 ideas might be really good. The other 4, probably not so much. But we will be in really big trouble if you're thinking I'm batting 1,000.
Yeah.
If you decide whatever idea I come in with that we've got to run off and do,
Right.
we will run this organization off the rail. So I count on having a team that can push back.
Yeah.
You have to surround yourself with people that can push back. And it's usually not a yes or no. It's not binary. It's you come in with an idea, and somebody says, well, that's kind of good, but maybe it would be better if we added this. And by the time you involve all of your team, you end up with something far better than any
Yeah.
idea you might come up with on your
Yeah,
own.
yeah, I agree with you. Well, 2 things that I think a lot of leaders struggle with, I struggle with it, is priorities and delegation. Like, I think every great leader has to be clear themselves on the priorities, but it's hard when there's so many things we want to do. So I'd love to know how you think about that in your head, like not distributing so many things for people to do that it's exhausting, and at the same time you want to be delegating so that they have ideas they want to do too. Is that a struggle for you?
What is? Let me maybe share a quick anecdote. So when I created what we called the Drive to 55, working
Right.
for the state, the first goal was to figure out what our mission was in the state of Tennessee. And I remember going all across the state. I talked to hundreds of stakeholders, including my predecessor here, Jody Pietro, and asking them, well, what ideas do you have to reform higher education? And I had a spreadsheet of over 300 ideas. But then when I asked, what's the mission of the state? Nobody knew. And here's the problem. If you don't have a mission, every idea is the same.
Yeah.
A good idea moves you further and faster toward your goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when I'm trying to prioritize, I think about what is our goal,
Yeah.
and then make sure that we prioritize the ideas that move us further and fastest toward our goal.
Right.
Having said that, that's me being philosophical. On a daily basis, I say yes to too many things that
Yeah.
aren't the big idea.
Yeah.
And so you just have to do your best to stay disciplined and make sure that you've got teammates that can take, maybe some of those things aren't the things that are going to move you further and fastest towards your goal, but they still need to be done.
Right.
And make sure you got some
Right.
bone on your team that can take care of those.
So let's just go a little bit further down that road. I think one's calendar reveals one's priorities. And I think, I say this to people all the time, that's one of the hardest parts of my job is the calendar. It seems onerous. It's always feels like it's controlling me a little bit. What are your thoughts about that? Like, because the calendar fills up and then there's still things you wish weren't on there and things you wish you could do. How do you win that battle?
Okay, can I share what we should do, but don't check my calendar to
Okay.
see if I actually do what I say?
Yeah.
But I think, well, you're 100% right. Your calendar does reflect what your priorities are. And it's really easy to say yes to too many things. Here's a friend from 10 years ago that asked you to come speak to some event,
Yeah.
and out of obligation and friendship and loyalty, you say you're going to do it. The next thing you know, you look at your calendar for a week and you're doing a lot of things that aren't moving you further and faster
Right.
towards your goal.
Right.
So you got to be cautious of that, and I unfortunately do that. Though I would say, as I think about my calendar, there's a lot of time spent with team building, relationship building. You and I, the chancellors get together once a
Right.
month. The executive leadership team will have a retreat once a month. There's a lot of time spent aligning and coordinating, and there are times when you think, man, I'm not getting anything done with all these dang meetings.
Right.
But it's really important.
Right.
Building those relationships is really important. Spending the time to get aligned and coordinate is really important. Just,
You know,
just
I
agree with your
remember
point.
a mentor of mine, I was saying, I can't, I'm doing all these meetings. I don't have time to do the job. And she said to me, Donde, the meetings are the job.
Yeah.
And I want to reject that, but it's true. It
Yeah.
is the big part of the job.
As the leader,
Yeah.
we're in charge of creating the culture, setting the direction, getting people aligned, and fortunately, unfortunately, you usually do that in a meeting with a group.
Yeah.
Now, make the meeting fun, try to find an interesting place, but at the end of the day, that is a big part of it. We're
Yeah.
not the guys sitting on a on a monitor doing analytics or
That's true.
spreadsheets. That's kind of
That's right.
that's unfortunately if that's what you want to do, you're not gonna. That's being a leader is not
It's not that.
for you.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so here's a question. What's the hardest part of this job for you? Being president of the University of Tennessee system, all over the state. What's been the hardest part?
It's the best part and the hardest part is just making sure that we create this culture of B1UT, being a unified team. And why it's hard, it's just really easy for all of us, including myself, to get really laser focused on the job at hand. And it's really easy to say, okay, I don't have time to get aligned and work with other folks. I've got this in front of me to do. And this is true in any organization. And just making sure that we're constantly finding ways to work together. And people are not working together out of malice. We're just not working together because we're just busy doing our thing.
Right.
And we don't sometimes realize just the power and the impact of being aligned and working together. So that would be hard, but it's also the most rewarding.
Yeah.
Recently, actually I just did my performance review.
Okay.
And I get to review it with the board tomorrow.
Oh, lovely.
But yes, we got all the objectives. It's usually listing all the objectives and what we accomplished. But I'll say, you and I and all the chancellors, one of the things I'm proud of most is how aligned we are. And I know you hear this.
Yeah.
I hear from everybody how you and I are aligned,
Yeah.
how all the chancellors across the state are aligned, how the University of Tennessee is aligned with state government.
Right.
That's not true across the country, and it wasn't true before we got here.
Yeah.
Also with Oak Ridge National Labs, you and I were just at Oak Ridge National Lab board meeting, and we had some old timers there that have been there for over 30 years.
Right.
In their last meeting say, in their history, they've never seen
Right.
UT and Oak Ridge National Labs being so aligned. Farm Bureau was with them yesterday, same thing. So I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to do that all across the state, and all types of organizations really do work as a team. So
Right.
always a challenge. It's like you can never let it.
Yeah.
You can never stop, because it's all, you don't say, oh, I've done that.
Yeah.
It's something you constantly have to do, but it's worth it.
So let's just take that a little bit further. So people come up to me all the time in the state, in Knoxville, saying, oh gosh, you and Randy seem to just have such a great partnership, great relationship. And so you've already affirmed that. I guess you think that's true. I
Yes,
hope.
100%.
So what do you think what can we attribute that to? It's working.
Yeah.
So what are we doing that's making it work, do you think?
Well, I think, I'll give myself some credit.
Yeah.
And that I hired the right person.
I like that one.
We wanted somebody that was bold, that was innovative, that was energetic, and that was a strong leader. You were all those things.
Yep.
So if I hadn't hired that, then we'd probably not
Okay.
gone so well. So we start with that. So we have that in common. But I think we also work at being aligned. I mean, as maybe others don't know, but we meet every week.
That's right.
We spend an hour and we talk about our challenges and get advice from each other. And so I think the communication, the trust
Yeah.
is really important. And then back to, our characteristic, we both think boldly and want to do innovative things and try to move fast. And so it just creates a good relationship.
I don't know if you remember this. It was a few weeks ago. You called me, and I was like having a down afternoon. And you said, how are you doing? And I said, fine. He goes, no. And you said something like, no, you're not. What is it? And it was just something, I don't even remember now what it was. But the being able to sort of share like that to me is really important. And it's not always the great. Sometimes I tell my team this. Sometimes we have to put on an act. Sometimes, like the leader has to buffer everybody else from the uncertainty. And so sometimes we may want to just like get all into the uncertainty and how bad it is, but we really can't as a leader. Do you agree with me on that?
1,000%. Everybody's watching us, even when you don't think they are. And that's true of all leaders.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, as we've talked to Helen Hilton Hill, we're always communicating, even when we're not speaking.
That's right.
We used to have at my company, we reminded ourselves, no matter what we were talking about in our Monday staff meeting, when we walk out the door, we need to be energetic and excited and happy. Because if any of us or all of us or one of us walks out with some kind of gloom on their face, it immediately ripples all through the organization. Something bad's happening. We're going to get laid off. The company's going bankrupt. Just because maybe you spilled coffee in your lap or something. So you got to always be up and be able to demonstrate that. And I can't remember what it was that maybe we were talking about that day, but oftentimes we get down about the small things. And we got to remind ourselves, booming enrollment, booming research, everything that really matters in the big picture are going really good. But oftentimes your mood for the day is set by something small. Either there's a personnel issue, somebody's not getting along with somebody, and you got to make sure that you keep bringing yourself back up to the big picture.
So let me ask you, I totally agree with that. And it's just right now, especially with kind of what's going on, higher ed's a little bit under attack. And so we continue to have that conversation. Hey, the mission hasn't changed. We're still at work at something really important. So one of the ways I've always defined leadership is sort of simple to say, but not simple to do. And I just want to see what you think about this. Leadership is the willingness to act. And I think in higher ed, for me, that's important because we're really good at talking. Like, let's have another committee meeting and let's have another meeting. But it's people who actually do something. Do you agree with that? And did you see that throughout your career? Like my whole career has been in higher ed. So in your business.
100%. And I'll say that, with my company, so we created the Invisible Fence. It was a very successful product. And everybody that's ever had a product that's been successful, people will come up to them afterwards and say, gosh, I wish I had that idea. Ideas are easy. People have ideas all the time. It's betting everything you own. When I was 29 years old, after 8 years of running small businesses, sleeping in $18 hotels, eating on $8 a day, schlepping electric fencing supplies all over the Southeast, my total net worth, according to my balance sheet, was $26,000. I have no idea where the cash was, but that's what it said I was worth. Had this guy that could design this first product for me for $30,000. So I bet everything I had saved up my entire life on one idea. So it's not the ideas, it's actually being willing to take the risk. I would say though, so I think leadership is about being able to take the risk, take the initiative. But at the same time, I think it's also about leading us to some place that makes the world a better place. Because to lead, you have to have people that want to follow. And to follow someone, they would believe in what you're doing. And people want to follow somebody that they feel is going to do something that's impactful, that's going to make a difference. And so I think it's both. You've got to have a place that people really want to go. We're going to make this the greatest decade in the history of the University of Tennessee. At my company, we were going to be the most trusted brand in pets. At the state, we were going to drive to 55 to get to 55% post-secondary attainment. To have something that is aspirational and gets people excited, but it's going to push you. It's just a bit above what people would think is actually possible, or probable, but still possible.
I love that. Okay, one last question. I think when a lot of people hear the name Randy Boyd, they think generous. You're generous with your time, with your talents, with your resources, your money. You've affected this city in so many ways. How has that affected the way you lead? Like there's this part of you that just, you want to make things better, and you're going to use your own resources to do that. As a leader, it has to creep in there some way, a little bit.
Let's say first, why give back? And this, I'll speak for Jenny and I.
Yeah.
Both of us started off, even though I wouldn't say we weren't poor. Her father was a teacher. My dad had a struggling business that went Chapter 11 when I was 23 years old.
Yeah.
Good, but challenged. So we're poor, but we knew what it was like to sacrifice and do without. And because of the University of Tennessee, because of the great public schools we were able to go to, and because of all the mentors, my scoutmaster, my dad, I had so many mentors, so many people that believed in both of us and gave into us. Because of them, we're successful. And we believe, if we spent the rest of our life focusing on giving back every day, we'll still die in debt. There's no way we can ever pay back all the things that we've been blessed with. So when it comes to leading the University of Tennessee, I think about that. Like, what are we doing to make sure the world's a better place as a result? And sometimes it helps me get through the small stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look back and, this day was cluttered with all the issues that you and I might talk about on a Monday morning or a Monday meeting, with all the little details, but we're making an impact. And I believe, we've talked about this, that if you really want to make the biggest impact in the lives of Tennesseans, there's no better place than the University of Tennessee.
I agree. And thank you so much for being the president, for hiring me, and for being here today.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.